Hey, how are you?
Hey. All right. Greetings from Walla Walla, actually.
Oh, how's Walla Walla?
Today was a nice day. What do you have?
But you and other people in America might know what they are. You know, we have to think about the way the first lady put.
How you guys doing? Scott, are you guys eating dinner? Is that why we don't have video of you?
We are done eating dinner. But we had Pinotage from South Africa. So.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. Natalie, are you coming on the trip?
Oh, I would love to.
Well,
Sounds fabulous. I really haven't looked into it.
well, you should.
But it's next summer, right?
Yes.
Not this summer, but next summer. I actually have another wine event tomorrow night, so I can't attend, but are you going to record that one that I could watch it later?
Brad.
Yeah, it'll be recorded.
Okay.
And Ed, since we just said we're talking about the Rhone trip, I don't know if you saw the email I sent out this afternoon, but apparently Brad said the cabins are filling fast. So if you guys all want to come.
We'll be there tomorrow night for that.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
And I think we're going to be in. So Brian and Lauren, who I don't think you met, trying to think, who do they know? The what winery?
JM.
JM, does that ring a bell?
JM Cellars?
So I guess they sent us the link before you sent us your link.
Excellent. All right. Well, Brad is going to be leading that. You'll probably remember him from when did you cut? You were in May, I think you spoke last May, June, something like that.
I don't know. What year is it now?
I don't know. I don't know what day it is.
I have no clue. I just feel really old anymore. So.
Paul, are you coming to Are you coming to France?
I am hoping to.
Okay.
I don't know. I like the tropical backdrop there. I think I'd rather go there.
I don't know if the wine's as good down there, or at least you're going to pay a hell of a lot more for it.
Well, you can't do that then. Can't go there. How's everybody's January going? Lower.
Going fast.
I would echo that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey, Anthony.
sorry about that. I put in the wrong ID, and it's like, yeah, it's the river cruise starts way later, and it's like, oh yeah.
Well, apparently people are really excited about the river cruise. So Brad joined us today too. And you know, people can't do 2 weeks or 2 days of happy hour in a row.
Awesome.
So if you guys have any questions on the cruise, and Adrish is going to be rich by then because his company is going to be taken off, and he's going to definitely be able to join us.
So he's treating everybody to the cruise? Wow, that's awesome.
For me?
It's the cruise, not the wine.
All right. So yeah, and we have. And Micah, are you guys? Oh, it was Cindy and Jordan who couldn't come in 2021 because of a graduation. But are you guys thinking about coming in 2022?
Of course.
Perfect.
Oh,
This will be a good.
Wait, you mean the cruise or harvest? Harvest for sure. Maybe the cruise.
Okay.
You have our
We
video
also
off.
have a graduation this year, so we'll have to see about 2022.
Well, yeah, that's when the cruise is. It's 2022. Starts in Provence, goes up the Rhone into Burgundy. It's gonna be
That might be the first time we get to travel like that. That would be cool.
Yeah.
By the way, I just came back from the dentist, so if you see me dripping wine down my face, can you let me know, please?
Nice.
We'll open that invite up to anybody who wants to know how to drink right now. So, all right. Well, mom and dad are on their way back from Yakima, so they had to run up this afternoon. So I'm supposed to give the Vineyard update, which is not very exciting. Because, oh, wait, first, cheers. Cheers, everybody.
I've got it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So yeah, there's not much happening in the vineyard. Vines are still dormant. We're getting a fair amount of precipitation this year. Oh, nice backdrop, Patrish. And so which is good. Last winter was really dry. And so that between the poor set and the dry winter, that's one of the reasons that yields were down like 30% across the state last year. This year we'll have enough soil moisture going into the season. We probably won't have to start irrigating before like super early like we did last year. But our soils are there's so much rock there. They definitely, too much moisture is never a problem up on the hills. So things are looking good. We're going to start pruning in a couple of weeks. And so we'll start getting some stuff happening back in the vineyard soon. But for now, it's still dormant. It's still winter. They're still sleeping, which is kind of nice. And did you make the olives? You noshing on? I'm just slackers. And Becky's in cartooning class, and she always makes the food. But
We have an olive spread.
okay, you're in theme. We'll take it.
Yeah.
All right. I thought it'd be a really good pairing with the Syrah, since the Syrah always has that floral component to it. And with the lavender and the herbs of Provence, I thought it'd be a really great pairing. So, all right. Well, with that, if anybody, we'll turn it over to Anthony, who you guys all know from last time. And I'm going to start out with a question, because we were going to talk about South Africa. Since I know nothing about South Africa, this is kind of a shameless, what do I want to learn about sort of topic. But Anthony, you got to pick your regions, right? Of reviewing?
Yes.
You should ask just for fun's sake, why Washington, but then why South Africa?
Well, I think South Africa is greatly under-marketed in the States, and I see its potential. And I saw what they offered, 10 to 20 years ago, and America got a pretty decent dose of entry level to poorly made wines. And I think that put a lot of doubt in American consumers' minds of what South African wine truly was. And having tried a lot of different wines that aren't necessarily exported to the States, I saw their potential. And it's probably one of the greatest underdog stories in the world of wine currently. So I was just a sucker for it, that there's a great, I see its potential. And what they needed was someone to be honest and open and fair about what's happening. Look at the good, look at the bad, and take an unbiased approach at what's going on. If you follow a lot of the top people who are talking about South African wine, they tend to be British, because the Brits consume about 3 times as much South African wine as the Americans do. And they get amazing deals on exports. So they're drinking a lot better wines that we get here. And I just wanted to be the one person that says, maybe it's not as good, or maybe it's actually better than what people are saying. And my job was to take a serious look at all the wines and be open and honest about their potential of what's going on. So with that, I was glad that South Africa was really kind of why I was brought on to the Wine Advocate. And with that, it just so happened I was able to delightfully pick up Washington State as well. So that was a win-win for me. But yeah, that's kind of how it all came about. Our previous South African guy is British, and he went back to the UK. So he lives in London now, and he's still kind of tapped into that whole British market, doing great things for Galoni at Vince. But I wanted to be one person that takes the honest look at those wines and says yes or no, or this is worth your time, this isn't. And in my last report, I tasted through easily 16 to 1700 wines from South Africa, and easily half of them are not exported to the US. So I wanted to be the person who, if you are an importer for wine looking to make some money on wine and give your consumers something they've never seen before, an opportunity to say, hey, the Wine Advocate has already given this wine 92 points and it's only $25. Like, that's amazing. We should pick this up. Because there's incredible deals with South African wine. I think they're greatly underappreciated and undervalued for what they are. But yeah, cool, awesome. Any other questions before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of South African wine? No, cool, awesome. So first off, show of hands. Who has had a negative experience enjoying South African wine or not enjoying South African wine? Right. So I see 3, 4. Cool. Yeah. So it's one of those things where we got kind of a bad taste of South African wine late 90s, early 2000s, and they exported a lot of flawed wine that was challenged with tannin management that clearly needed to be on point, and with touches of oxidation and VA, wines that really should have never been sent to the market. But with that, they still needed to sell these, and we got a pretty interesting dose of them. Since then, I want to share my screen to kind of show you what's going on. So let me see if I can pull this up and then do the share screen. Desktop. Open system. Let's see if I can get this to work. No, not that one. I'm sorry, it's my first time doing the share screen. So yeah, let's see.
That's a good point, Kevin, that, you ask if we've had a bad South African experience, but we've all had bad Riesling experiences and bad Cabernet experiences, and bad wines from Bordeaux. We don't hate the regions and hold it against them, because
Of course, for sure.
bad wine that comes out everywhere.
I'm trying to see where I can do this. Maybe not. I'm sorry, maybe I can't pull it up. So one of the interesting things about South Africa just over the last 10 years is that they have been currently pulling up their vines at a interesting rate, where they were at about 108,000 hectares planted for the entirety of for South Africa, and they're currently at just over 92,000 hectares. So they are pulling these vines up. The problem with that is they are doing so because the farmers, they have to basically make money. So if these wines can't sell, they're looking at this crop that necessarily isn't selling. So they have to figure out, well, I need to make money, I need to make a living. So they'll end up pulling up these crops, whether it's Cabernet or Pinotage or Chenin Blanc or Chardonnay or Cabernet, to plant peaches or nuts because they need to make money. That's ultimately what the overall country needs. They need major investments from the outside, and it's slowly happening. They've had investments from the people from Cause Nationale in Bordeaux. They've had people from America. They've had people from Burgundy and the Rhone and Loire, and all the know-how it's trickling into South Africa as a whole. The interesting thing about that, though, is it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And how to change people's perception of what wine is all about, or what a country is all about. So we've seen the growth and focus on these styles of wines that are really intriguing. It's one of those things where the focus now has to be on quality, because with less vine acreage, you have to make a better quality wine. One of the kind of unfortunate truths of South Africa is the average bottle sells for about 45 rand, which is about $3 American. And that consists of about 85% of the overall market. So when you have 85% of a wine industry with an average price of $3 a bottle, you can't sustain that industry. It's not gonna stay afloat for very much longer. So one of my takeaways from my last report last year was that while there is still some flawed wine being made in South Africa, that it's never been better. With that, quality is continuing to rise, but it is imperative that the price point of the wines increase. You can't go from $3 to $6 overnight and have the same quality. What you can do is you can increase quality, refine what you're doing, have better tannin management, better focus in the vineyards to make better quality wines, healthier grapes, and you end up with an overall better wine. That was kind of my takeaway to some of the producers, saying, like, listen, I think ultimately what you need to do is you need to fire some of your drinkers. If they love you at $3, I think you need to make sure that they'll still like you at $6, because $6 is not too much to ask for a bottle of wine. With that being said, I do believe that South Africa currently is the best pound for pound dollar to quality ratio of any country on the planet currently. My go-to used to be Spain. Where else could you go and find current release that's 10 years old, that's been aged to perfection for still around $20 to $40? But that's the thing, is looking at these wines, they have a unique history, where if you think about South Africa, it got its start really before Bordeaux really got their start. And they've been making wines longer than Bordeaux has. So what you have is this ongoing kind of refinement of a wine industry, and their political history is fairly similar to America's history, where we went through a time when, certain people were looked down upon and certain demographics were looked down upon. The apartheid, when it ended in the mid-90s, I think at that moment, it was a very pivotal moment for South African wine industry as a whole, just because at that point, now you have players getting into the game that could make change of what's going on. Now you have a better understanding of the whole of what's happening both in the community, and then you have all these different government entities coming to aid in different programs to give the community a better chance to be successful. So with that, the government created programs like the BBBEE, which is the broad-based Black economic empowerment, which it basically gave them the tools to be successful. Where 85% of the country is Black, and 15% of it is white, and the whites basically own the majority of the land. And now you have, just in our lifetime, we've seen the very first Black graduate from Stellenbosch University to be a winemaker, and he was very successful. And then since then, he was very successful, so much so he actually went back, became a double major, got a major in engineering as well, and now he actually works directly with the farmers. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was going to say everybody needs a degree in engineering as well.
Right, exactly, yeah. Science, right? So it's if when I think of South African wine, and I think back to like, the late 1600s when they first got their start with the plantings at Constancia. Some of those styles still exist, but the country is far more dynamic and making some really, really incredible wines. Unfortunately, some of the best wines, they either are not exported to the US or they're on such high allocation that only restaurants get them and they only get, just a few bottles and that's it. Case in point, one of the kind of heroes of the Swartland is Eben Saadi. And when I visited with him in the summer of 2019, he basically said that his entire yearly allocation basically goes up and he knows exactly who he's going to sell to. And he sells his entire allotment of everything he's made in about 2 hours, which is amazing if you think about it. Think about like an entire year's worth of work. And then now you have to put that up on the market and try and sell it. He sells that within 2 hours flat. Which is just insane when you think about it. He doesn't make that much wine, but the amount of thoughtfulness that they're now having to look at these vines to make really high quality wines, it's really intriguing. There are so many old vines that they've just been left to kind of do what they do. People are now going back and they're finding these plantings, these old vines that are 80, 90 years old and saying, I want to make wine from that because that's really cool. And I mean, how many places on the planet can you just walk over to a vineyard and be like, these grapes haven't been tended to. They're all dry farmed and the roots go down, 50, 60 feet and no one's tended to them in looks like at least a decade. They'll go and find like who owns the property and then they'll start a contract and start making incredible wines. And so much now that there's a really intriguing program called the Old Vines Project. And that's all they do is they focus on high quality wines with mineral focus that are at least 45 years of age or older. And that's all they do is just make really, really incredible wines. And you'll find those the bottles of wine, they'll typically have like a little label on the side, something that kind of looks like this and say Old Vine Project. And on that, it'll actually have the date that the vines were planted. So they'll say like, 1964. You're like, oh, what's that from? It's like, that's when we're planted and a lot of cool stuff going on. So to kind of get up to speed over the last 10 years, I think has been the most dynamic part of South African wine history, just because they've had time to, come together as a country. There's still a bit of segregation, but things are going to stay a little broken for a little while longer, just because that's kind of the way it worked out. I mean, look at America, we're still kind of broken. So, but what's happening now is I see far better community involvement and teamwork and team playing in the wine community, and this growing number of thoughtful, high quality, focused winemaking, trying to make really high quality wine, and people now understanding biodynamics and organics and implementing that into their strategies. Stellenbosch, I mean, just now, less than half a decade ago, came together and created something that is now called the SEC, the Stellenbosch Cabernet Collective. And what their goal is basically to tell the world what they are doing in Stellenbosch. They basically formed a collective membership where they all come together, kind of the same understanding of what the Club de Trésors, Special Club Champagne, these smaller growers that don't necessarily produce enough volume where people don't know who they are, or they don't really have enough marketing power to go to all these different countries, but they've come together and they will have this embossed bottle that says Stellenbosch across the top of the neck of the bottle, across the top here. And all they do is their job is to promote Stellenbosch Cabernet as a category. When we think about Cabernet as a whole, most people gravitate towards two places on the planet, California and Bordeaux. And I'm slowly helping to change that whole argument to also put Stellenbosch and Washington in that conversation. You know, people often will ask, you know, well, what's second and or what's third and fourth, whether it's Australia or, you know, Chile. But that's some of the most interesting things that I've seen coming currently. When people think of South African wine, how many of you think of red wine first? Raise your hands. Red, kind of.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, Chenin Blanc, hands down, is the most planted varietal in South Africa, and is really a white wine dominated country. But their claim to fame is Pinotage, which has now been around for about 100 years now, and I think too many people, you know, got a poor dose of entry level, poorly made, poorly crafted Pinotage back about, you know, 20 years ago. And the interesting thing about Pinotage is the reason why it was originally created was to look at the intense heat spikes that South Africa sees in the summertime. It does get quite hot there. So they needed a grape that could withstand some drought and some heat. But they also wanted the floral and you know, seductive red berry tones of Pinot Noir. So they chose Cinsault and Pinot Noir, and they crossed these two, and they ended up with Pinotage. Originally, Cinsault was called Hermitage. So they just took Pinot Noir and Hermitage and spliced them together, just like Cabernet Sauvignon came together from Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. And there they created that name. The only thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about Pinotage is, yes, it was created about 100 years ago, but it's only been within like the last 40 years that they've been able to really mass produce and spread the crop around the country to be able to play with it. But I think that if you've had 100 years to play with a grape and it's still kind of lackluster, I think, you know, the time is kind of running out for that wine. And what I see emerging for Pinotage is two distinctive categories or styles of wine that Pinotage exists within. Some of the best expressions were big, massive, extracted, dark, juicy, with a significant oak presence. That style of wine already exists, and that's like, you know, Napa Cabernet. So the Napa Cabernet lovers of the world will clearly like that style of Pinotage. But there's been this emergence of this new style of Pinotage, and that's the absolute other end of the pendulum, where it is lighter, lifted, lower alcohol. It looks almost like Pinot Noir. You can see through it. It's very light ruby with good acidity, good mineral tension, and a floral lift, which is completely the exact opposite of the other style. So you have these two dynamic styles, which are polar opposites, but it's the same grape. And I had a chance to talk to one of the great Cabernet and Pinotage producers in Stellenbosch, and their takeaway was, listen, if you think about Cinsault, it's kind of like Grenache, or it's lighter. For example, this is Cinsault, where you can actually see through it. It's kind of like a Grenache. Pinot Noir you can see through as well. He says, if your mother is a midget and your father is a midget and the son is like 7 feet tall, you know something's not quite right. So their whole idea was to make Pinotage exactly the way the wine was intended to be. And they cut a lot of slack for it, which is unfortunate. But there's when I take a step back and I look at it from the outside and I see, okay, well, what is South African Pinotage? Is it big, massive, extractive, and oak driven, or is it lighter, lifted, floral, and red fruit driven with good acidity? And the answer is it's somewhere in between. The only problem is everything that fell in between was lacking. It needed depth or character or complexity or finesse. And it was interesting overall. We'll take you back to the late 90s, early 2000s, where Swartland started to get its wings. They came together, and the top producers decided to create the Swartland Revolution. And what it was is the top producers from the Swartland, which is a fairly large area, about 2.5 to 3 hours north of Cape Town. It's very warm. It's very dry. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and it reminded me of Phoenix, where you had these kind of dry plains with like these mountains that seemed to kind of jet out of the ground, and there was cactus there. Very minimal grasslands, very minimal bushes or shrubs. It was just pretty much just desert, very sandy, rocky soils. You have these amazing expressions of Chenin Blanc, of Syrah, of Grenache, of Cinsault, even some Cabernet here and there. And they all came together, and they all decided to create this identity, which was this organization called the Swartland Revolution. And their job was basically to promote themselves. And it was one of the most successful modern day wine pushes for South Africa. Since then, they've kind of stopped promoting the Swartland Revolution. It's kind of come to an end. I think ultimately because it was such a big idea. Like, how do you promote such a large area and all these different varietals to tell the world what you are? So this is why I think ultimately that the Stellenbosch Cabernet Collective will be far more successful. And I believe we're going to start seeing more Stellenbosch Cabernet start to come out and be available to drinkers everywhere. Awesome. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Robin had asked about, and I mean, you bring up Cabernet, but are there any other grapes that are widely planted that are doing really well that we should be watching out for? Maybe.
Sure. Yeah. So I would think of South Africa as microclimates. You can grow a lot of great expressions that are terroir driven. So when looking at places like the Himalayan Valley, that's closer to the coast, so it's cooler. You have some great Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays that are coming out from those regions. So you'll have these pockets that will produce very high quality wines, but I would say overall South Africa is really not known for Pinot Noir or Chardonnay, but some of the most exciting Pinot Noir and Chardonnay that I'm currently trying is coming from these regions. So, producers like, Hamilton Russell make amazing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. When talking about, Klein Constantia, they've been around, since day one back in the 1600s, where they've pretty much been consistently making a certain style, which is Vin de Constance, is very, very popular, a couple hundred years ago, and still remains very popular. Since the inception of MCC, which is Method Cap Classique, it's basically the same style of making champagne. They decided to kind of make it their own and call it MCC, Method Cap Classique. You have a lot of interesting sparkling wines now starting to be made. But one of the most important factors of making sparkling wine, it has to be grown in a very cool climate or have a lot of wind where it's fairly chilly. So I find a lot of great quality sparkling wines coming from the Franschhoek region, where you'll find La Lude and Colmont, which JP Colmont, he's actually a Frenchman who actually owns a proper champagne house in Champagne and fell in love with the absolute stunning beauty of South Africa, decided to stay. So he lives there most of the year and then makes some amazing sparkling wines that are just absolutely stellar. Some of the takeaways were the Absolu, which is basically a zero dosage screaming high, beautiful acidity that's been rested in bottle for like 8 years before release. Real stunning stuff that it would clearly confuse a champagne expert. They would say, this seems like a warmer vintage for champagne, but I don't know what's going on here, but I like it. They wouldn't necessarily be like the Alb or Montenegro Rennes, but it's something that's certainly really good. White wines, you should be able to find relatively easily. Chenin Blanc, you should be able to find at any major big box store like Bevmo or Total Wine and More. But yeah, there's a lot of emerging styles. One that I'm keen on currently right now that there's not a market for is Cinsault, where for the longest time people have been discounting. It's mainly been the Brits. They've been discounting Cinsault as a whole. And they just say it's fine for like a picnic or a trip to the beach, but it's not a serious wine. It can't age. And it's just a very simple wine. I've been seeing this uptick in single bottlings of Cinsault for the last few years, and being able to talk to some of the top Cabernet producers from the 70s from Stellenbosch, they have been on the resurgence of doing a style that they did and made in the 70s, where they would take South African Cinsault from Stellenbosch and then actually blend it in with their Cabernet. Back then, the laws were a little different. So as long as you had 1% more than the other percentages of the grape varietals, you can call it what the majority of the grape was. So you'd find these, Cabernet bottlings, only 51% Cabernet, 49% Cinsault, and they're amazing and stellar. And what they found was it made a lighter style of Cabernet, but it aged incredibly well. And they didn't realize this until 10 to 15 years later when they went back to them and realized how well they had aged. And it's one of those things where Cinsault, if you think about Cinsault as a varietal, there's not a single place really on the planet that has, planted their flag down and saying, this is what Cinsault is all about. Originally came from France, but it's hard to find pure bottlings of Cinsault. It's typically used in rosés, but not as a pure, red wine. And they can age because the Stellenbosch Cabernet producers have figured this out in the 70s and 80s. And with the growing numbers of Cinsault bottlings, it's not a fluke. It's something that is going to be here to stay. And I do believe that South Africa could firmly take that flag and plant it and say, Cinsault has a profile and this is what it is. I think Cinsault will be a better overall category than Pinotage in 10 to 15 years. Awesome. Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah. Laura just asked, do you think the economic issues facing South African growers are similar to what Argentina has faced? Domestic buyers mostly buying wine.
That's a loaded question. Well, I would say that between the Argentine government and where their economy is, I'd say that South Africa, their economy is in an overall better place. The difference there is that as the growers are trying to make more money, it puts pressure on the negotiants, the winemakers and the wine owners to make sure that the growers are getting enough money to stay in business. So I can see some laterals to Argentina. The difference there is I feel Argentina is already far more established than South Africa is, and they have better trades. But their wine in pretty much the wine trade all around the world globally, where South Africa, they have a pretty substantial European and EU wine trade. And I see their trade and exports with America growing. I can actually see it doubling within the next 5 to 10 years. So I think there are some similarities. I think currently you're going to find better pricing in South Africa than you'll find with Argentina right now. But both economies are still growing and trying to get back on top. Awesome. Bottle recommends we buy locally. So Ed and Sue, where are you today? What city, what state?
We're in downtown Seattle.
Downtown Seattle, cool. So, let's see. So you should be able to find Hamilton Russell. You should be able to find Klein Constancia. You should be able to find some Swartland producers like Adi Badenhurst. Let's see. You should be able to find some Milanu, possibly, maybe in like in a lockup. You should also be able to find Kanankop. And then I know that Lismore is trying to put their wines in more places. Honestly, probably the best thing to do is actually try and connect with the distributor themselves rather than trying to find something locally. When I found a Cinsault that I really liked, and actually I brought some home myself, I put some wine in my suitcase, and I had a digital weigher, made sure that I didn't go over the limit because I had 2 suitcases. I was like, so I'm going to fill both these up as much as I can to bring home stuff that I can't get. When I got back to the States, I knew I couldn't find certain bottles, but I knew that they had picked up, a distributor in Jersey had picked up that same producer, but not the bottlings that I liked. So I was able to get the other bottlings from them. So, and you can do that. You can call up a distributor most times and say, listen, I'm a private consumer, and purchase directly from them. Because I guarantee you'll find better quality wine calling a distributor and reaching out. But the challenge is first making sure that the wine is actually distributed to the US, because a lot of them aren't. And once you do find those wines, they tend to be rather allocated. So you have to know when they're arriving, when they're getting off the boat into the warehouse, into their inventory. So you can pick up the phone and give them a call and say, great, I want to buy a case, because you'll probably never end up finding those bottles locally. But for the big names, like the ones I mentioned, you should be able to find those. And that's the thing is America, again, only consumes 5% of the overall production of South Africa. So we don't see that much wine. And this is why, obviously the main country that consumes the most South African wine is South Africa. But outside that, the UK drinks up about 15 to 18%, followed by Switzerland and Germany with about 15% both. So it's one of those things where there's not too much left when you're there. So I suppose be thankful that you're not in an Asian country, because the Asian countries, it's really hard to find South African wine there. And I went to Taipei and couldn't find any. They're like, South Africa makes wine? What are you talking about? They thought it was crazy. Yeah. Awesome.
Do you know about any partnerships between Washington winemakers? You mentioned there's a lot of partnerships going on. I don't know anybody in Washington that's also making wine in South Africa. Maybe the Betts or the Griesel's.
So the Griesel's, they do, but the Griesel's bought Betts. So they actually started with their Chenin Blanc property first. Okay. And then they had their eye on Betts for a while, so they purchased it. So actually when I went to go visit with Bob and Lewis, they actually had me try their latest vintage of Chenin Blanc there. So, but there it's more like there was a South African that had a wine business that ended up just buying an existing property rather than working directly with. So I know I've talked to a few people who have done kind of harvest interns back and forth between Washington and South Africa, but no one firmly in both doing both, only just the one ownership that I'm currently aware of. Awesome. Let's see. Talk about Detouring wines. Yeah, so Detouring actually just tasted through the set. They're quite amazing, and they have, I would consider them kind of like as far as like a brand, almost like how Mondavi used to be, where they're very quality focused, and I think they're underrated and underpriced. I think they're delicious wines. I think they're very thoughtfully made. They're quite delicious. The Fusion and the 5, I think should be close to about double their price, but they're not. It's one of those things where you can find amazing wines in South Africa currently, and there's not too much to go around. So yeah, they're quite delicious. And I haven't met with them in person, but they were on the roster this last year, and then COVID hit and shut all that down. So I wish I had more insight to tell you, but yeah, they're delicious wines. If you find them, give them a shot for sure. They're definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Argentina thoughts.
And for those of you guys who missed it in the chat, Brad has a trip in, would you say November planned, and you're planning another wine and safari trip. So, I mean, every time I have had friends who come back from South Africa from working harvest and they show me all their vintage pictures, I'm always ready to get on a plane. So, anybody else goes and looks at a map and looks at some pictures of South Africa and thinks about, the wines and the scenery, you should talk to Brad for sure, because he makes it easy to travel.
I'm sorry, I'm just going back. I didn't realize all these questions were coming in on the side. Better known, great Pinotage. Yeah. South Africa is stunningly beautiful. There's no easy way to get there because it's a beast of travel. No matter how you fly there, just be prepared to do it. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. If you do it slow, it's terrible. But if you do it fast, the quicker, the better. How I work my work trips is I will leave my home and then fly, and then wherever I get to, that's when my day starts. So I get off the plane and I go. So driving from Napa to SFO, a flight from SFO to Frankfurt, it's 12 hours. Quick layover of only a couple hours, and then Frankfurt to Cape Town, 13 hours straight down. You're looking at, a full day to 36 hours of continuous travel. It's kind of miserable, but when you get there, like there's no point in going for like a day or two. You need to take at least 2 weeks. Just go. Like the exchange rate is amazing. I went there and I spent a night. It was about 3 or 4 hours having a 15-course meal with wine pairings for every single course. It was about 3.5, 4 hours, and I spent $120 with tip. It's that crazy. You fly in, you land, and you immediately see Table Mountain, like this beautiful rock face jutting out of the ground. They have the Cape Floral Kingdom, which has more biodiversity than the entirety of the UK, just in the Cape Town area. Land, and it's beautiful. You can go to Boulder Beach, which has penguins and seals there, which is kind of surreal because it's kind of warm. You see these penguins all kind of doing their thing. And then from Cape Town, the airport, to Stellenbosch, it's an hour drive. They have Uber. You can take an Uber there. It's fairly safe. You get there and you can walk around. The exchange rate's amazing. It's stunningly beautiful, and there's great wines everywhere. It's really, really great. But once you get there, you need to take at least 2 weeks because you're going to dread that trip back. It's going to suck. But yeah, one of the things is the safari, and that safari is not necessarily my thing. But almost all the Americans I talk to, they're like, we're here for safari. It's like, I'm here for wine. That's it. Like wine. Yeah, it's great. It's one of those things where the wildlife there, like the natural wildlife in vineyards, you're like, is that an actual springbok? And is that a baboon? Don't get too close because those things are beasts. They're extremely strong, and they'll rip an entire cordon, snap it like a twig, and they're beastly strong.
So what does that do in the vineyards? I mean, I know that like the people who grow grapes in Virginia have to put up fencing so the deer don't come in and eat the grapes. Yeah. But like in Napa, the only issue with the cougars is you just don't want to get eaten by a cougar.
So the main challenge is baboons are not that smart. So they'll see a grape, like a bunch of grapes, and say, "Ooh, cool, it's food," and they'll start eating it and realize they're not ripe, and it's all very malicky and like high acid, and they'll be pissed off. So they'll throw the grapes on the ground and they'll go for the next bunch, not thinking that all the grapes are not ripe yet. So they'll continually eat these grapes, and they just keep getting more pissed off and more pissed off. So they started like literally ripping cordons off. And, you know, I've had a few discussions with vintners and enologists. They'll go out there and be like, they just know you go out there and like their vineyard is just torn to crap. It's just like, it looks like a truck came through and ran over, like there's branches everywhere and leaves and grapes. So one of the smartest things I heard on the last trip was at Klein Constantia, they got just fed up with like year after year after year having to basically sacrifice one of their plots. And they have like 120 different plots of Sauvignon Blanc and trying to make all these beautiful plots. What they did is decided to plant Sauvignon Blanc on the other side of the fence. So when the baboons come down from the mountain, they can have their fun with what they call the sacrificial Sauvignon Blanc vineyard. And it's about 1/4 of an acre, and all they do is they just have fun with it, and they just start eating it. And yeah, and if it's not ripe, then they'll just leave it alone or rip it apart and then come back. And but yeah, it's a serious challenge. Growing grapes in South Africa, it presents far more challenges than just about any other place on the planet. When thinking about this, you don't have to, you know, in Washington, you don't have to do baboons or you know, deer necessarily, but it's like the wild, wild west, and you end up seeing all sorts of different wildlife you've never heard or seen before. So much so, I don't know if anyone's ever been to South Africa and then have heard of the sound that the hadidas make. The hadidas almost looks like a pterodactyl type bird. It's a disgusting looking leathery bird that when it flies, the ongoing joke with the hadidas is it's the only bird that is scared of heights, because when it flies, it gets about 6 feet off the ground. It goes fuck, 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 and it has like these piercing like and once one takes off, they all take off. So it's like going to like the pet store and doing that one squeaky toy, and all the other squeaky toys go off, and it's like make it stop. And yeah, there's all sorts of things that you would never believe that are there and are challenge. All different species of animals coming to potentially hurt your vineyards, and you have to not only be aware of them, but also other climatic influences like the Cape Doctor, where you have these nasty, gnarly winds that are really cold that can literally rip vines out of the ground because they're that piercing and that like gale force. I experienced this when I was in Franschhoek for the night, where once the sun set, the winds kicked up, and I was like, it didn't really say there's going to be a storm or anything. It was like, no, that's Cape Doctor, that's just the wind. And so much so that there was a glass sliding door that it was like a 3-panel one that like kind of went back and retracted into itself. The whole thing was actually starting to buckle off of the railing on the bottom, and leaves were starting to flood into the room because it was such an immense force. So there's all these different things that could potentially hurt your vineyards, and it's really crazy. Cool, awesome. Any other questions?
Can they plant, if you've got things that come in and eat your grapes, can you plant hot peppers instead of grapes?
You can. The problem with that is that the hot peppers would only ripen at a certain time, and the wildlife tends to come in before things are ripe. So it would be eating an underripe pepper, which wouldn't then be hot. But yeah, there's all sorts of wonderful things that happen there. There's their own type of like Indian curry. It's like Durban curry after Durbanville. Really, really tasty stuff. Their little pairing bites. They tend to enjoy biltong, which is like a beef jerky but not fully dried. And one of the interesting takeaways of my experience going to visit the winelands and the farms there where the grapes grow is that in the States, we have wineries. You go to the winery to taste wine, you have an experience, but there to keep people employed and to continue to make money is most wineries will end up having a restaurant there. So once the winery is done, the restaurant stays open for dinner, and then they serve their wines at dinner. So I would say at least 25% of the wineries there will have a restaurant associated with them. So much so that there was one, which I thought really odd to have at a winery, but this winery was actually promoting the fact that they have a kids' playground, and they're promoting their next kid's birthday party at the winery because they had this little jungle gym set with like a slide and monkey bars and swing. And I thought, what an interesting concept to take kids to the winery so they can play on the playground, but the parents can drink wine. It's things happen there that make you think like that's something I've never seen before, like a playground at a winery. Like you think it would be for the drunkards that drink too much wine. Like, yeah, let's go on the swing. It's like, no, this is to keep the community active and to keep them employed and to be all encompassing. So they're brought up with this, like with wine in their day-to-day life, which is a very smart thing to do. Here I'd never find in the States. So like you're promoting, kids to come to a winery, you're promoting alcohol to children. That's would never happen. Cool. Awesome. Trip scheduled last December. Include 3 nights in luxury tents in the Eastern Cape plus wine. That sounds amazing. Brad?
You want to tell us about your trips coming up? Because those tents sound fantastic.
Oh, here we go. Okay, sorry. Couldn't unmute for a minute there. I always love to talk about my trips. The one in November this year, late October, early November, was one that we couldn't do last December. South Africa was more than willing to have us come, but Emirates had canceled all of their schedules, and then said no. I mean, we couldn't make it. All these hotels and the safari place were ready for us, and we had no way of getting there. So Emirates still isn't back up to the 7-day-a-week schedule they used to have from Seattle to Dubai.
Yeah.
So last week I made the call to switch it all over to BA through London, who has 2 flights from here to London and then a really good service into Cape Town. So that tour is, it's a garden tour. If anybody that doesn't know Cisco Morris from Cairo here. It's a garden tour with, he does like his reds, so it's wine, garden, safari. The one I'm working on for January of next year will be skip the gardens. It'll just be the 3 days of safari, probably again on the Eastern Cape, and then wine in Franschhoek and Stellenbosch and Parle. But it'll be at least half of our time spent drinking wine.
Cool. That sounds like a lovely trip. Yeah, that's we've partnered with United Airways as one of our sponsors. So we fly United, and seeing my friends fly the United Emirates flights going into Baghdad and Dubai, I was like, oh man, you're blessed. It's a great flight, very comfortable, but it ends up taking you a couple hours out of your way. Yeah. But very luxurious for sure. That's the way to do it. Beautiful. Awesome. Let's see. Travel safaris and yeah, cool.
Oh, you had a question. Hold on. Roll back and find it. Exciting partnerships with major food producers that you think will bring some exciting new wines here to the US.
Cool. So they're already happening. So I would say currently one of the most interesting collaborations I've seen so far is with Klein Constantia. So what they've done is they started a technically a new brand quite a number of years ago called Anwilka, and they partnered with Bruno Prats of Côte d'Astronel. So pretty significant Bordeaux house, second growth producer, making some really great Cabernet, but because it's in Stellenbosch, they keep it separate from Constantia, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away, which is really focused on white wine production. They're the ones who, of course, started with the Vin de Constance, a sweet wine that was kind of made by harvesting in tries with, basically dried grapes, and you end up with this really sweet wine. But the focus now for the estate has, really been focused on Sauvignon Blanc and all the terroir expressions of individual vineyards from within the slope of Constantiaberg, where they're located. So they have partnered with Jolivet Pascal to make their Métis Sauvignon Blanc. So he's making some really great Sauvignon Blanc in the Loire. There's some Burgundy producers that are coming down, but I had a chance to talk to the tourism board of Stellenbosch, and ultimately my takeaway was, I think what they really need is they need some serious investors to create world-class like compound resorts with like golf courses and spas and packages to go out to the wineries, that once you get people there, that's like half the battle. It's just trying to get there because it's so far to travel. That will increase the potential for outside producers to come to South Africa and start spending the money and form these partnerships. So they're continuing to grow, and people are seeing the quality for South Africa, and it continues to grow every single day. And that's ultimately what they need. So there's only about a dozen or so collaborations currently, and I could see it growing to close to 2 or 3 dozen in the next decade to two. But ultimately, what the country needs for the industry is an injection of funds. They need money, is what they need. So that's ultimately what I see happening is a continuation of the outside influences coming and bringing their thoughts and ideas to South Africa to elevate quality overall, so they can start paying the farmers more, which ends up making better quality grapes to make better quality wine, which they can charge more for.
Although I think they've given themselves a little bit of a hurdle with the Prohibition a couple times this year.
Not a couple times. Couple is 2. They're on their 3rd Prohibition currently right now. And they stopped all exports, global exports. Their idea was to stop the virus to ever coming into the country, which at that point, it was already a global thing. So they thought if we stopped all global exports, not just wine, but everything, they shut down the ports altogether. And that was how all the wine was getting out. But they still allowed the airports to stay open, which was, I think if that's your concern, you shut down the airport, and the trains and the highways, and you just quarantine yourself altogether. That failed. The South African government was quickly brought to attention why shutting down exports was a bad idea, because the wine's already made. Let someone else buy it. Let's collect that money. That keeps the economy going. But they're hurting right now, and there's been at least 120 wineries since the start of COVID that basically have just walked away and said, we're done. We're not doing it. We can't sustain this. We were already kind of, pretty close to the edge, and now we're just done. So there are 120 producers that have just locked up and said, we're done. And now they're on to another business. It's really challenging, but that's reality of business. Having smart business decisions, because they could stay in business and continue to lose money while they're in business, trying to stay in business. But the first Prohibition wasn't that bad, because they said it's Thursday night, starting Monday morning, we're stopping the sale of alcohol and cigarettes. So everyone kind of went out, had a flurry of a weekend to purchase what they did. It lasted longer than it probably should have. And then once it was repealed, they said, great. What it did do, though, is it actually put a lot of pressure on the supermarkets, and there was a lot of people bringing in pineapple, and you couldn't keep pineapple on the shelf because people said, all you had to do is have some yeast, buy the pineapple, crush it up, and make some pineapple wine or pineapple beer, and you're good to go. And that's what a lot of people did. The second Prohibition came pretty strict. Cyril, the president, got on the national TV and said, starting immediately, sale of alcohol and cigarettes are prohibited. You can't do it. It's done. And that went on for about 2 or 3 months. And then at the end of December, same thing. He got back on and said, sorry, again, we're going to keep this shut down. So that it's hard to keep an industry afloat when you continually shut down sales of the goods you're trying to sell. It's like, how do you do it? Yeah, cool. Are there exciting partners? That's where we already got. Cool, awesome. Any other questions? I mean, I could go on with like history, but you know, history is just that. It's sometimes gets a little boring, but yeah. French Huguenots, yay. Dutch, yay, yeah.
Do we have any more questions?
Cool.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, South Africa, the takeaway is South Africa is unique and interesting place making dynamic wines that unfortunately America doesn't get to see too much of. So I suppose if you are an importer and you're paying attention to my notes, you can see like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like it's only sold in South Africa and in the UK, but not in the US yet. I could make some money here. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. That was awesome. And next month, we are going to go back to the book that was originally brought up with Andy Walker. And then we talked about it again with the barbecue one. We are going to do book club. So if you do not have your copy of The Botanist and the Vintner, right? Robin, do you have it in front of you? Are you that organized? I know you guys got it already. So we're going to do that the last Wednesday of February. And Mary Orland, who is friends with Dave from the barbecue one, she's going to talk about that. She's going to talk about the book. So it is winter. We're all still supposed to be socially distancing until we all get safe to go out into the world. So it's a good opportunity, good chance to read a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but I do have it, so I'll be ready.
Perfect. Yeah, I ordered it. I have to read it. And then Dad looked at me. He's like, and then you're going to give it to me, right? So I got to get started so we can all get through it.
Yeah, we can't just show up and drink. It's not that kind of a book club, right?
Well, yes and no. But you're supposed to have read it in true book club fashion.
Some of it.
Read at least the first half of the book or picked it up and read a couple paragraphs, and then we can sit around and drink. And Mary, she can tell us about it.
Yep.
So there we go.
Cool.
All right, guys. If anybody needs the link to tomorrow's happy hour with Brad, specifically about the Rhone, it's in farther down the email. If you have any questions, then reach out to him in between at your convenience. His contact is also on the website, which is in the email. And whether you want to go to South Africa or France or all of the above, I will say the trips that he plans are fantastic and wonderful. And I am so looking forward to the Rhone. And it would be a fun happy hour trip. So all in person. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you,
thank you all.
Anthony.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Hope
Thanks,
you
Anthony.
learned a little something, and that ultimately it's kind of a weird thing to talk about a situation or a style of wine that it's rather hard to find. So if you have access to South African wines in your market, good, check them out. But that's they're kind of hard to come by. So I think they're value driven and good quality. But I do believe in drinking local. So if you're in Washington, drink Washington wine for sure.
If you're in any part of the country, drink Washington.
That's right.
Real.
Cool.
So, all right. Well, we'll see you guys all next month. And if you run out of wine like Micah did, then website is still available for ordering. And because we don't want anybody to go thirsty. We're not in South Africa.
See you tomorrow.
Okay, see you tomorrow, Carrie.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.